And now we've got to check in with the billionaire, entrepreneur, and Kamala Harris supporter, Mark Cuban, because he just got called out on live television. Take a listen to this clip from Squawk Box on CNBC.
Hey, Mark, I'm looking at an NBC article from our corporate parent that just says, I guess, at an Arizona town hall meeting, when you were asked about the possibility of taxing unrealized capital gains, you said if you really thought that the vice president would do that you'd campaign against her. So I guess that was a true comment you made. And then my follow-up
So what
question,
I said was, I said it's not going to happen. Absolutely not going to happen. If for some reason she lied about it, I would campaign against her so there wouldn't be a second term.
What on earth? Guys, I got nothing against Mark Cuban. I've always liked him on Shark Tank, and he seems like a smart businessman. But politically, I have some questions about what this man is smoking. They're talking about a tax on unrealized capital gains. Basically, a tax on the increased value of stocks or assets that have increased in value that you haven't sold yet. Right now, there's only a tax on capital gains. Once you sell the stock or the asset, you get taxed on how much money you made on it. But a very fringe left-wing idea, economically speaking, is to tax the unrealized gains before you even cash them out, before you even have any income from the asset, to try to grab more money from the rich to fund more redistribution or welfare or whatever. This idea is really controversial and arguably unconstitutional because the Constitution doesn't authorize that kind of a wealth tax. And many businessmen and entrepreneurs warn that it would have hugely detrimental economic impacts on the stock market. Plus, there's the concern that it would warp incentives and discourage people from making these kinds of investments and instead lead them to just cash out their assets early. And there's huge implementation questions about when they would be taxed on this asset. Would they get a massive refund if the asset goes back down? How would this be enforced? There's so many layers of complexity and dysfunction that would follow such a system. So understandably, many people are very concerned by the fact that Kamala Harris has endorsed this idea. It was part of Joe Biden's tax plan, which Kamala says she fully supports. But Mark Cuban is on TV saying, no, she doesn't really support that. And if she was lying about not supporting it, but she said she does support it, so what you're saying doesn't make sense, Mark, then I'd campaign against her and there wouldn't be a second term. Which, side note, is kind of arrogant. As if, if Mark Cuban changed his support, she'd never get reelected. Babe, you're rich, but I don't think you're that important, okay? You wouldn't decide a whole election just based on your endorsement. Anyway, I just found it so bizarre how he's saying he would totally flip in his support for Kamala and even campaign against her if she supported this thing that Kamala currently says she supports. The math is not mathing. And guys, you don't have to take my word for this. As the host mentioned, NBC News, that conservative news outlet, has pointed out this weird double standard. The headline is really something. Mark Cuban speaks out against piece of Harris's tax plan while campaigning for her. The vice president in August endorsed Joe Biden's 2025 budget, which included a plan to tax unrealized gains for the highest earners in the U.S. They report from Phoenix, Arizona, that the billionaire entrepreneur Mark Cuban said while campaigning for Vice President Kamala Harris that he would campaign against her if he thought she would tax wealthy people's unrealized gains, which is part of the tax plan she has endorsed. Cuban said that taxing capital gains would be an economy killer, and Kamala knows that. So, Mark Cuban thinks a tax on unrealized capital gains is an economy killer, which I agree with him. I think he's correct. But he's supporting Kamala even though she's endorsed that policy. The best case scenario, what he's saying here is, don't worry guys, Kamala's just a liar. She's not going to actually do the things she says she supports and is going to do, which is not the endorsement you think it is, Mark. And the more likely scenario is that she actually does plan to do the thing she says she's going to do, and she might have given you quiet reassurances behind the scenes, but she's just playing you for a fool to get your money and get your support. Either way, it was really interesting to me to see Mark Cuban checked on this in real time on live TV. What do you think? Do you support taxing unrealized capital gains? And how do you feel about Mark Cuban these days? Because his support for Kamala has definitely changed the way I look at him, although I do still respect him as a businessman. Let me know in the comments below.